Hey everyone. Okay, cool. I think we're now live. I'm just going to go ahead and check on the PM Lesson page. Um, this is a live PM Lesson mock interview where we do live mock interviews to help you guys learn how to mock interview better with product managers all around the world. Today I'm with Namisha. Namisha, why don't you start off? Maybe you can just introduce yourself and while I kind of get the system set up and running.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Namisha Balgopal. I am a senior product manager at Twitch. Previously, I was a product manager at HP for about 3.5 years. And yeah, that's pretty much everything about me. I work with Stephen with Hack Mental Health. So we have some other fun stuff happening.
Yeah. Namisha and I work together on Hack Mental Health, which, if you guys don't know, is an organization dedicated to mental health innovation through technology. So it's a great cause and purpose also for technology and for product management, if you guys are looking for that. But today we're focused on the interview specifically. So I know some of you guys are just joining in right now, but as you guys join in, feel free to ask questions, comments, likes, and hearts. We can see them on our side, and it helps us also. So why don't we go ahead and get started on the question that I was imagining we'd start on. Sure. So the question that I had in mind was, design an alarm clock for the visually impaired.
Okay.
So we're going to go through that question, kind of talk through it, and after the end of the session, I'll provide feedback. We can also have questions and comments from people watching in as we go through it too. So whenever you're ready, and again, this is a PM lesson, live mock interview. The purpose for the folks listening in and for the folks watching is that it's meant to be an educational experience where you can learn about how product managers answer questions like this one.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm going to have this piece of paper here to take notes on because I need to be able to write out my thoughts in a very logical manner. This is kind of what I always do, so it kind of helps me stay focused. So
a tip for other people too is to always write down notes. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So the first thing I would want to know, does this need to be a physical product?
It's up to you to choose if you want it to be physical or non-physical. Yeah.
Okay. And then do I need to think about like long-term implications of the product from like a strategy perspective, or can I focus on a single product?
Yeah, let's focus on let's focus on one product for now. Yeah.
Okay. And then what are some metrics that this company would focus on?
So I would focus on engagement metrics. So like usage basically, and that people are actually purchasing this product, that people are getting the product, that whatever we create.
Okay. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to just go through and identify who my customer is, what their pain points are, what their use cases would be, and then I'll go into identifying some business goals, so like from a metric standpoint and what we're trying to do overall. And then I go into brainstorming some potential features that could solve the problem, prioritizing them, and then going back and like understanding who my customer is, relating it back to my customer use case, possibly reprioritizing, and then summarizing kind of what my final proposed solution would be.
Cool. So, sounds good.
Perfect. So when I think about a customer, someone who'd want to use an alarm clock that's visually impaired, I would think about one, the person who is visually impaired, and then also their caretaker or whoever is around them. So that could be a significant other, a parent, a sibling, just someone that's always there. So I'm going to kind of break that down. So if I say someone is visually impaired, the main problems they're probably facing are not being able to access some type of mechanism to tell time pretty easily, which means they probably have to depend on other people to tell the time. So there's not really a way for them to be independent of the other person who's there supporting them. And then if I think on the other hand of that, when I think of like the caretaker or a significant other, I would think of the pain points they deal with is probably always having to wake up really early because they have to wake up the other person, or helping them stay on time. So that might be going to meetings or appointments and always making sure they are where they need to be, since they don't have a tool to kind of address this. So I'm going to pause on that for a second and just kind of let the customer pain point sit. And I'm going to think about, as a business, what do we care about? So it looks like we care a lot about engagement. So that would mean, for me, if I decide to build a physical product, that could potentially mean unit sales or revenue. If I try to build an application, that will probably most likely be downloads in the App Store, and then daily active users. So it's really going to depend on the format I choose to go with. I think for this use case, I'm going to go with building an application out, because I think it'll support multiple users. But that is TBD based on what my brainstorming comes up with. So what are some potential features that we could actually build? That could be a physical alarm clock that is voice activated and then maybe talks back to you. That could be a physical alarm clock that has like braille on it, so they can actually feel what the buttons are to make sure that they're actually hitting snooze, setting the time, and then it has to have some type of response mechanism. Maybe an alarm clock that doesn't need to be plugged in, because if you think about if someone accidentally hits like the cord and gets unplugged, there's no way for people to know unless the alarm doesn't work. So having some type of like default mechanism that not only allows the device to work when it's not plugged in, so maybe like rechargeable batteries or something. And then something that maybe integrates with an application so then they can like travel with it. That would probably solve a use case of just needing to be in multiple places and having that accessibility. And then, so that really addresses the visually impaired use case. But then if I think about the caretaker, they should be able to use it as well. So that needs to be easy for them to understand. So not only like it should have physical numbers, it should be very intuitive, maybe look similar to current alarm clock that people are used to using. And then kind of thinking through all of that. So I wrote down pretty much what I think would be important features that we would need to address from a caretaker and visually impaired perspective. Does all of that make sense so far?
Yeah, and I guess, so it sounds like we're leaning a little bit towards like the software solution, if that's right. Like, or I don't know, I'm curious, like, how do you think about like the having a physical device or a software device, and like what would convince you for one or the other? Like, what is there a reason that you would, or a use case maybe that's different for one of them, that you would prefer a hardware versus a software device?
Yeah, I think for a hardware device, there's some limitations, right? You'd have to think about, can this be used a lot by a person? Yeah. Are they able to travel with it? Is everyone able to use it? The other question is, with a software device, like an application, that doesn't really address both use cases. So on one hand, maybe the person who's actually using it, the visually impaired person, could use the application, but that might be hard for a caretaker to use, because there's all these steps of having to unlock the phone, finding the application, being able to use it, syncing it. So based on kind of this conversation I've just had, I think it actually makes more sense to lean towards a physical product that will address more of the pain points in the use cases, and then deprioritizing sometimes.
Hold on, I'm frozen a bit, so let me just set this up again. Hey, okay, I'm back.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, sorry, I got frozen.
What I was saying?
I got frozen. Yeah, I just heard the end that you were saying you're leaning more towards a hardware product that, and then you cut off. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll just rephrase it. I'll just say it again.
Thanks.
I was saying I would probably lean more towards a hardware product than a software product, because the more I think about the customer requirements and the use cases and their pain points,
yeah,
a lot of them can be addressed through a physical product, not only for the visually impaired, but also for the caretaker, versus an application might be very hard for a caretaker to use, because then they have to go unlock the person's phone, they have to figure out what the application is, there has to be some type of authentication. There's just a lot of other steps that you have to think through. So it might make sense to start with the hardware product, and then down the road, that's when you start thinking about building out a potential application.
Gotcha. Cool. Okay, that makes sense to me. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm down to move on now to kind of, now that we've sort of, general scoping and general sense of kind of what we're trying to go for. Like, maybe we can dive deeper into a little bit about the vision of the product, and then how we would actually think about features for this product and how we'd prioritize those features.
Yeah. So I think as far as product goals,
Yeah.
I would say we need to address some specific pain points that tie back to the customer. So if I think of pain points I would want to immediately address, they would be being able to be used by both the caretaker and the visually impaired. So that's one main product goal. The other one would be easy to use. So something that has a really quick, easy feedback mechanism for them to be able to understand how to learn and use it quickly. And then back to like the prioritization points I kind of mentioned, I'm going to go through and reprioritize those to figure out what can we really focus on now versus later. Because there's no way to tackle all of the use cases and all the problems with a single product. So I think prioritization is going to be very key.
And so it sounds like we're prioritizing by like accessibility being, or like ease of use being one of the important traits, basically. Is that right?
Yeah, I think ease of use would probably be one of the main things to focus on, and then thinking through the edge cases of how would this potentially be used, who else is using it, what are some misses that might happen if we don't think through the actual workflow. Okay,
cool. That makes sense. And I'm curious, like, do you see this as something that could be used by visually, like not visually impaired people, or is that like, is this specific to the visually impaired?
Yeah, I think it should be used by both. I think, yes, we are targeting people who are visually impaired, but if we think about their environment and people who are around you all the time, you have other people who may not be visually impaired. So being able to have an alarm clock that fits both needs would actually make a lot more sense than having a single alarm clock that only addresses a small part of the market.
Cool. Okay, yeah, sounds good. I'm done with the follow-up questions. You can keep going.
Cool. So then if I go back to reprioritizing kind of the features I thought through and what my goals would be, I think one of the main things that needs to be addressed in this product is that it is voice activated, communicates back to you, and has some type of feedback mechanism. That way we can actually address the customer problem of how do I know what I'm doing with my alarm clock? I think the next one would be having the concept of like backups. So if the alarm clock is not working like from the voice activation standpoint, that they're still able to use it and the thought doesn't become like a useless piece of plastic. So maybe having like braille buttons, like the letters on next to where the buttons are, so they can still use it in different scenarios, different use cases. And then going off that same train of thought, probably something that doesn't need to be plugged into work. So like you get power when it's plugged in, but you still have some type of like rechargeable battery or something inside. So if it's accidentally like unplugged when you're vacuuming, it can still work. So then the next morning you still wake up.
Yeah.
And then something that the caretaker should be able to use as well. So if I'm thinking about like what this alarm clock would physically look like, it should look similar to something that's already out on the market. So maybe using that for inspiration to then build in these features versus building features and then kind of making it fit into an alarm clock. So working backwards from that standpoint. And then I think later down the road, that's when we would start thinking about, okay, does this integrate with an application? Do we add voice activation within the application? Can they manage it? How do we have an application that doesn't need to require your phone being unlocked so everyone can use it? I think those are things that can be addressed in the future.
Cool. I love that you thought through the, I'm stepping a little bit outside my interview hat right now, but like I love that you're thinking about the power and all those kinds of aspects of the physical product. So just taking that hat off right now, because that's something that I think people don't think about when they think about this kind of stuff. But interview hat back on. Cool, makes sense. I see that. So we've sort of listed out a bunch of like features and aspects to it. Like, so how are we going to think through like actually implementing some of these things? Like, yeah, go ahead.
So I think there's definitely a lot of trade-off decisions that need to be made, that need to be thought through. So I think we already know that an application won't immediately address the needs and the concerns that we have. So if we're going to go with hardware, we need to understand, does that means we may need to build an alarm clock that's portable. Like, how big does this actually need to be? Is it something that someone's actually going to want to travel with? Like, you don't want to carry this big piece of plastic with you everywhere. So how do we think about size? Are we okay building a larger alarm clock that just sits at your house, or do we want something that people can actually say, hey, this supports me wherever I am, and we kind of build that value for them? But like the good thing is that if we have a caretaker who's using this alarm clock and they're really excited about it, then we're actually supporting multiple use cases. So we're actually addressing different parts of the market. But I think before making any of the decisions on like how the hardware should be built, like, do they have other people in their house that supports them? And then if there are, talk to those people and understand, okay, what are your biggest pain points? So right now, all the pain points I've inferred are just me making assumptions. These all need to be validated still. And then that may lead to me reprioritizing everything I've just said.
Gotcha. Cool. And sorry, by the way, for the folks listening in, I know I'm freezing in and out a bit, but I think Namisha is still able to communicate and put up at the end. Sorry for if any freezing issues happen again. We'll try our best with the bandwidth. Okay, that makes sense. And yeah, I think it's a good point to like step out of our shoes and be like, okay, we're not a blind or a visually impaired user. So like, how do we're kind of speculating empathy here. We're kind of like thinking about another user, but like we're not actually that user. So I guess I just had one last follow-up question, and then we can kind of kick it to like other folks. And I wanted to keep this a little short as an example so that people can actually chime in on other stuff. So how would you, Namisha, kind of like think about building that empathy? Like, what would you do? Like, what were the steps that you would take kind of as a PM if you were in charge of this product and you don't know any visually impaired users or visually impaired folks? So like, I know you say like talking door to door and that kind of stuff. Like, are there any other tools or insights that you would want to gather that might be useful here? You might think about?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that I would want to look at. I think the first thing to understand isn't even how they use an alarm clock. I think the first thing would be, okay, let me go talk to people. Like, first let me find people who are visually impaired. That might be through friends, through maybe there's like a community, maybe there's a meetup group, maybe there's a school, kind of finding those people that fit the use case of what I'm trying to build. I even need to think about like different age groups. Like, am I trying to build something for people who are in elementary school, high school, college, workforce? Like, who am I trying to target with this clock? But I think what's really valuable is kind of talking to that entire spectrum of people, figuring out what your trends are, and then taking the step and saying, okay, now walk me through your daily activities. What do you do? How do you use a microwave? How do you like walk through your house and figure out where you are, right? Like, what are the daily things you do? And really understanding and putting myself in the shoes of my customer before I even try to build anything. Because I can make a bunch of assumptions that are completely wrong. That doesn't help anything. So first, just kind of talking to them, understand their day-to-day activities, then starting to talk to them. And I think this is where like a discovery script is very important, so that you make sure you understand what questions you're asking, what answers you're trying to get back. So then going through the steps of, okay, how do you use an alarm clock? What do you wish your alarm clock had that it doesn't have, right? And then filtering all of that, saying, okay, people are going to ask for a lot of things, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can build them immediately. So kind of prioritizing what their needs are. And then kind of just opening up, saying, if you could build the perfect alarm clock, what would you want? And then taking that information and then using that to figure out what features I'd want to build.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, that's a great list. Like, I think it's really important as a PM not only to just come in and, in these interviews, it's kind of artificial. Where like, what would you do in this situation right now? Like, and like, no one knows what they're going to do right now, right? Like, but what are the steps that you would take to find out the information so that you could make that decision? That's almost more important than the actual answer.
Absolutely.
Cool. So I want to take a break now that thanks Namisha for doing the interview. Yes. In just a moment, I want to have people from the audience or people listening in to give questions and comments. So I know there's like about a few of you guys watching the video right now. We'd love to get your comments, questions, follow-up questions for any of us as we continue talking for a bit. So please comment now if you have anything, even if it's just to say hi. We'd love to say hi and do shout outs and that kind of stuff too. But in the meantime, otherwise, Namisha, if people watching this wanted to connect with you further, where would they go or how would they connect to you? And I think Namisha's I think you might be frozen or having technical difficulties right now, but in just a moment, I'll also provide feedback as well. But hey, Namisha, so the question, so sorry, we're going a little bit in and out on the bandwidth, but we're mostly okay. It like stops in 10 seconds. Basically, what I asked is like, how would people follow you or find you online?
Yeah, so I have an Instagram channel you can reach out to me at. It's at TechGirlHustle. So you can reach out to me there. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Namisha B.
Cool. And so Namisha, we have follow-up questions for you. So I hope you're ready. So the commenters, so Monil has a question about how would you measure success for the product?
That is a great question. I don't think I actually answered that. So I would say if I was building an application, I would look at downloads in the App Store. So maybe understanding, okay, how long does it take for me to get 100 plus downloads? Measuring the retention of those downloads, like do people keep using it? And then the number of daily active users who actually use the application at least maybe once a day, maybe once in the morning, maybe twice, kind of understanding what that daily active user rate looks like.
Cool. Manil, hopefully that answers your question. Next up, we have a question from Dhruv that I also was going to ask as a follow-up to. Why wouldn't you use OK Google, or why would this product be different from an OK Google, Google Home, and that kind of product? Or like, how would you distinguish the products?
Yeah, so I think that is a fantastic question. I think that might be actually a little hard. But I think when you think about like an alarm clock, sometimes like I personally have like a personal assistant. So sometimes it doesn't always listen to you, right? So you have to think through like those steps. Like, okay, if it's the Wi-Fi is not working, if I have an Amazon Echo, if it's unplugged, how would you actually use that? And they haven't really solved those use cases yet. So that's how I think we would come in and build something that's specific for this.
Yeah, I think it speaks to a good point, which is like the reason that people use physical alarm clocks still is that they're reliable, right? Like, OK Google is not quite there yet. Like, and maybe it is for some users, and I think it tries to be, but like it's not. Perhaps doesn't have the voice recognition that you want, or all that kind of like safety hatches if you want to go. I know we were talking earlier, and I wanted to mention in feedback too that we mentioned like, having the backups is really helpful too. So kind of like pitching it as a reliable, like separate device could be really cool. And then, when we talked about, and for you, Dhruv, too, like when we talked about like moving it to an app eventually later, I think that's what we were considering, kind of like maybe it could be an app on OK Google, or it could be a voice app or that kind of stuff too.
And building like the integration and like support system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and maybe there's something unique there about it that like that we'd have to rethink through, like how can it still be a unique feature, a unique product. I also like the point about portability too, that like you can take this thing with you. But I think that it's a good question, Dhruv, because it's like we're currently in a state where like you're between a world of all voice assistants and a physical world, and this product is kind of sitting between them, and it's unclear where that voice world will go, and like if it will go in the right direction, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, we have two more questions, and then I think we'll cut it off. If you have any last questions, now's the chance. So Monil has this follow-up question: how would you go about launching this product?
Yeah, I think go-to-market is really interesting. I think it's very different depending on type of product. So since we talked about a hardware product, I think the first thing you can do, since this is more of a B2C product, you would start probably doing some type of marketing promotions. That could be a blog post, that could be an article, sponsored articles, building out a really cool website, social media promotion, really building out a proper plan and figuring out what the avenues are. Because what's great about this physical product is that it's not only targeting visually impaired, so people who may not be able to actually look at the advertisements that are online. So maybe think about TV commercials or radio ads. And then you're also targeting people who are caretakers. So they actually will be able to see all these other promotions. So now you're increasing the number of people you can actually touch through some type of go-to-market plan that enables all types of media.
Yeah, I think yeah, that could be a whole separate question. We could like do a whole question on just go-to-market for like that kind of stuff. So Moniel, like you can follow up or check out the course online at pmlesson.com if you want to check out more kind of go-to-market questions too. We have one last question, but I don't quite understand it, Dhruv. So your question is, okay, I see. So Dhruv is asking, how do you answer acquisition questions for products like, say, Google Photos, etc.? And I asked him what he meant by acquisition, and he's saying acquiring more users for an existing product by approving it. So like if you have a product, how do you improve it to get more users for a product like Google Photos? I think it's, I don't know do you have a quick answer to this, Namisha, or the thought on this? Like, I think, well, you might be frozen right now, but.
Oh, no.
Oh no, you're good. Okay, hey,
Okay.
yeah. What any like thought on this one? This one's not really related to the question. I can also try to help answer too.
That's really fine. I have a short answer for this. I would say you can't improve a product without knowing what its problems are. So the first thing I would do is go talk to anybody who uses Google Photos, figure out what they don't like about it, what their main pain points are, what's stressing them out. I'm sure there's a bunch of data out there, especially when you're starting to look at like your internal data analysis, telling you when people are leaving it, what their retention looks like, what their use cases are. And then kind of sifting through all that data will then tell you, how do I actually build a feature that improves it? So maybe there's an issue with syncing an Android phone to Google Photos. Maybe there's an issue with syncing iOS to Google Photos. And then you can figure out like what percentage of users actually have an iPhone versus an Android phone, and then figuring out how do you optimize that.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I think, yeah, user empathy is like kind of the core of it. So like, how do you understand the product or the users more? And then you can start thinking about, how you acquire more users. Or maybe like what user segment are you considering? Like understand that user segment, and then
like is it business? Is it personal accounts? Like there's a lot you can sift through.
Cool. Okay. Well, thanks, Dhruv and Moniel, for the questions, and thanks all who are listening in and watching in. This video will be available later for you guys to record and to check out also. As Namisha mentioned, check her out on her Instagram account, Tech Girl Hustle. I got that right? Yeah?
Yes, okay. That's it.
And if you guys want more content like this or more useful PMUC interview stuff, you can check out pmlesson.com, where we host a ton of great resources just like this one. Cool. Well, thanks all for joining in, and thanks, Namisha, for being on the PM Lesson show.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Hey, guys. I just wanted to follow up and add some feedback since I didn't get to add it during the session with Namisha. Overall, I think that this interview went really well. What I would say, some pieces of feedback that I wanted to add to Namisha if I had more time, would be, I really like the point about using transcendent kind of design. So like the idea that a tool for a visually impaired should be just as good for the visually non-impaired. So people who can see well also will really enjoy using this product and may adopt this product as well. So I think designing a product that tackles both of those really well and just really makes something so accessible that it's beautiful and used by everyone is actually a really awesome way to go about thinking about a product. I also thought the conversation around physical versus software was interesting. In general, I think that you can't go wrong by choosing software because it's just so popular. But like in this particular use case, I think Namisha made some points about reliability, about the portability of the device. And I think really what we need to do to really understand is like empathize with that user a little bit better to understand what that user looks like and how they think about using their smartphone, all that kind of stuff. I thought the voice activated part with backups was really cool. So the idea that you have a fail-safe in case the voice part doesn't work. That's something that a lot of Google Homes and Amazon Alexas don't currently have. I also thought that the conversation around power and the physical hardware product was good. I think it's important to think through these kinds of things because it's a physical product. Plugging it in is such a small thing and seems like an edge case, but like has a huge implication for how a person goes about using that product. And ultimately, I think like the empathy point is really good. The point at the end about how can we step out of our shoes and think about this user actually and do research, and how would we go about finding that information given that we don't have the information right now. The other point that I wanted to make would be around kind of structure. And so I know Namisha outlined the structure in the beginning, but it's always good to kind of reemphasize that structure throughout. So like now we're in the part where we're talking about trade-offs. Now we're in the part where we're talking about prioritization and really making that clear as opposed to kind of jumping through them in a sort of fluid manner. It's better to just make that structure really clear as you go through it. So ultimately, I think, Namisha did a great job. Those are kind of my main points, and I thought she really aced it and had some interesting thoughts to say on some of them. And, a little bit more structure would help, and a little bit more kind of about the empathy and interweaving that throughout the answer would have made it even better.